So one thing would be to collect more information in the relevant dimension.
Are there any feedback systems?
The feedback system is that for the economy at any particular point, of course, there is a set of feedback loops because you have non-linear increasing returns kind of system. So if, for example, an industry produces more, it can it can produce even more in the next round of production. So there are positive feedback loops within this. But unlike the arrow-the-blue model where you have a negative feedback loop so that things reach this equilibrium, here from one period to the next, the equilibrium is going to be moving. Yeah, so that is the idea of the feedback here. So how does one actually check this or implement this practically? Because we're talking about a huge thing, the economy. So what I try to do is to take something like, let me see, go back. This is says something called social accounting matrix. And what social accounting matrix is a description of the economy as a whole at a point in time. So it's a huge matrix basically. You can think of it as an expansion of the input-output matrix of the society. So we have factors, we have production activities, and both factors and production activities are disaggregated. In particular, production activities include different technological possibilities within the same production activity. And factors, you can break them up into according to different types of capital that may be necessary, different skill levels of labor, different kinds of labor. And households, you can break down according to your interest. If you're interested, for example, in rural household, you should make a household classification that captures them. If you're interested in regional differences, for example, you want to know what happens to people in Akita, then you might want to have a Akita household account here. So basically, one is limited by one's needs, ingenuity, and of course, data. Ultimately.
Could you explain that column, endogenous account 1, 2, 3?
Right, so what you do is make these are the three accounts that are made endogenous, that is to be determined within the model. Other accounts, you have, for example, a capital account, you have saving, investment, etc. You have a rest of the world account, activities with the rest of the world. Now, in principle, of course, as we know from simultaneous equation models or modeling, it's up to us to make what we want to make endogenous and what we want to make exogenous, unless the theory completely dictates this. Now here, the theory does not dictate everything. The theory dictates, of course, that production activities, which are technologies, should be made endogenous. So this is, again, an important sense in which this theory truly is endogenous growth theory. And because we're interested in human welfare of households, we are making households endogenous. But we did not make households endogenous. Factors, because we're interested in distribution of income among the factors, allocation of income, we are making endogenous. Again, they need not be. But production activities must be endogenous because this is endogenous model of technological change. So once you have done that, basically you have a picture, a detailed picture of the economy at a point in time. So for information technology, for example, you have to include these under production activities. And you have to find out what kind of labor information technology uses, what kind of capital information technology uses, and you have to come up with a matrix that embodies that information. But once you have linearized the model, basically then you're approximating the nonlinear situation. Again, going back to the earlier issue raised, at a point in time, maybe the equilibrium you have reached is unique and stable. So you look at that. But more than that, you have to look at another equilibrium with some time to see if those, and you have to start with collecting fresh information about technological coefficients especially, and then see what changes now have been possible, because given the same, say, increase in final demand, now you might find actually that you can meet that much more efficiently, and that in fact what we might call the equivalent of multiplier in the economy may have actually increased because of technological progress as well as further economy in use of certain inputs, for example, and sometimes entirely new lines of production, for example, information technology. If the information technology is really that good in enhancing production, then comparing, say, Japan from 1985 to 1995 or 2000, or maybe 2005, when IT revolution is complete in Japan, we should find that, yes, impact of any kind of demand in Japan is met now much more efficiently and much better. So we should be able to answer this question quantitatively in that sense. So let me now go to instead of this kind of boring algebra, let's see if let me show you some real things that are going on. Do we need to click on another display, or because this doesn't seem to have anything? It's going back. It's going back to the proof was there somehow. But, okay, we go to. This is Japan's expenditures. These are some informations on Japan's expenditures on science and technology. I think it goes up to 1999. But more useful, I think, is comparison of Japan with other countries. Because we had some other pages, it's not clear. Oh, more forward. Okay, this is the space partition. And we need a definitely see. I have it here. Space, obviously the space. How about comparisons with other countries? Research and development expenditures by country and by progress. There, no satellites. Research expenditures and number of research. There it is. Yeah. So we have there. No surprises. USA is at the top, but Germany spends more than Japan, and so does France. Let's see. And UK. So Japan has the smallest expenditure according to this picture. And also, contrary to what people might think, US government actually funds a higher percentage of research and development expenditure than Japanese government does. Japan's figure is 20.4, whereas US point is 27.5. Of course, as a share of GDP, these figures are probably entirely right, because it should be higher for France, UK, and Germany. But the point is that, contrary to some myths in the West especially, Japanese government is not as heavily involved in research and development as the US government is. And absolutely, of course, US government spends more money. Of course, in terms of basic research, as you can see from the Nobel Prize winning, many countries, many advanced countries are more ahead of Japan. But one might say that much of technological progress really does not rely on basic research, but rather on on applied research and incremental kind of increases, which Japan has been able to use. In fact, one of the things that US policymakers from time to time and business leaders from time to time accuse Japan of is to use publicly published research and then to benefit from that. As a result, US has, some US firms are now contracting research privately to the universities, and you can help those firms, but you cannot publish the results that can be used by some other firms. So in some sense, the US philosophy or Western philosophy of free public domain of science has changed because of this considerably. But I think the information technology aspect of Japan, I don't think it is shown here. For 1999, I will just mention it, Japan spent about 5 times as much, more than 5 times as much in information technology as it did for space exploration. And I suppose it has become so important, this information technology, that people who are now in space exploration felt that they have to actually be more responsive to information technology. So in Japan, I have found out that people have started plans for launching satellites that will be connected to information technology aspects, and they called it iSpace program. iSpace, that is information technology and space program together. So this is, and I see that I don't have enough time, so I don't think I will bother showing you the details of their program. But what they want to do is basically to launch new satellites. Of course, that is what the space program is all about. And they call it the ETS-3 satellite. And this will be launched in the year 2003. And the idea is to interface the satellite and the information that is gathered by the satellite with both internet technology on ground and also cellular and wireless technology. So they are claiming that you can do many wonderful things, not only in Japan but also elsewhere. So they are saying, I'll just read the list to you, and then I will stop and see what you think and what the future looks like. They say, for example, that with this satellite and internet interface, one should be able to provide mobile medical care for remote areas and in emergency cases. That's one application. Secondly, educational usage for the field class on the theme of environmental issues. Thirdly, you could do image data transmission for improving efficiency of the remote sensing ground truth activities. What they really mean is that you should be able to find out if there is some kind of, any disturbance on the ground, rioting and such things, or what remote sensing really does in geology, as far as I know, is also to assess if there are any minerals and other kinds of things under the ground. But for that, you don't have to go so high up to do that kind of remote sensing. Then they also talk about sea surface data measurement and transmission experiment. I don't know what they have in mind, but since Japan is surrounded by sea on all sides, maybe it is useful. And they also talk about application for forest site management and reporting. And they talk about monitoring net water for volcanic ashes and flood problems. So I think volcanic problem, although I have not heard of real volcanic eruptions in Japan. Is flood a big problem in Japan? It is a big problem.
Earthquake.
Earthquake, they don't talk about earthquake. One thing I was wondering about. Maybe they will be too remote to actually see earthquake. Maybe on-ground instruments are better.
Or into underground.
Or underground instruments. Anyway, so you can see that even space scientists who basically ignored these things now are getting involved. And I think the incentive is coming from this shift in government policy, which is shown also in the R&D budget of the government. So it looks like Japan is changing in this respect. But interesting thing from this discussion that I think comes out is that there is lack of information about the information technology and its various impacts. So we need information about information technology itself. And B, we need better economic analysis of the impact of information technology. And for that, we need better models. And C, we also need to find out about either the welfare consequences in utility terms or the well-being consequences in capabilities terms of information technology. And as far as globalization is concerned, there too I remain a skeptic because it seems very much like it's not an unbegun process, but it's clearly an unfinished one. And there are many, many dangers which require innovative economic, political, and social management approaches rather than technological fix. Information technology by itself is not going to fix anything. It actually might make crises more rapid and more rapidly transmitted. So one has to be very, very careful again in drawing this kind of link between globalization, information technology, and the necessary improvement in human well-being. I think potentially all this can happen, but we need to think very carefully about the economics and, of course, beyond economics, the politics, ethics, and social aspects of these. I've done only, I guess, a tiny fraction, but I hope it will inspire others to do more.
Well, that was a great step. A big step for human being.
I don't know. Big step for me, but very small step for others. Thank you very much, Haider.
Very interesting.
We showed some question about the presentation by Professor Khan. Anyone? 内野さん、何かありますか？Thank you very much for a very interesting lecture. So, you apply this increasing returns and non-linear system approach to this innovation problem. Personally, what interests me right now is the finance problem, and I'm especially concerned about the network nature of within corporate sector.
Oh yes.
So, what industry ought to, which industry, and so on. So, do you think that this network structure or network nature of corporate within corporate sectors have something to do with the transmission mechanism of information or the volume or magnitude of information transmission or innovation in corporate sector in general?
It's a good question. Let me just make sure we mean the same thing by network. One could mean, in my mind, three possible things by network, maybe four. But first, one could simply have a human network, right? In the Japanese system, especially the human network, and of course, human beings are carriers of intelligence and information. Secondly, one could have digital network of computers and within the same institution or in different institutions. Thirdly, one could have network of firms. Firms themselves, could form a network, like in Keiretsu system. In fact, Professor Imai came up with his network theory, right, in the context of Keiretsu. So let me try to answer your question in all three senses of network. Yeah. So first, human network. To me, still that is the most important thing, because we have not devised, even for missiles and other systems, a fail-safe, non-human, completely mechanical system. For stock trading also, we have to be very careful, especially in times of panic. So every network in the other senses must have human network in it first. And there, I think two things are very important. One is training of the individuals, for which, of course, universities are one source, but on-the-job training is going to be very, very important, and continuous lifelong learning and training in the future, because the nature of information technology is that it keeps changing, and it keeps changing our view of what information is and also the value of information. So we have to keep up all the time. So that training is the first aspect. But the second aspect, which I think is also extremely important, is the human relations itself. And I think one reason why Japan feels uneasy now is because traditionally Japanese networks look very unwieldy and weird from outside. They look very strange. Somebody once told me that Japan was a natto society, where it's like natto. But actually to Japanese, I can see it now because I'm married to a Japanese person and I have some close Japanese friends and have visited some Japanese organizations, that there is a process, culturally conditioned process of conversation, sometimes even without words, and consensus building. That is very important. And that actually works much better as long as the system is isolated. But once this system of networks is in connection with an international system or becomes partially internationalized, then it becomes very difficult and signals become confusing to interpret. So this, I think, is partly a problem. So in the future, the best way to address it, I think, is for Japanese organizations to both educate themselves and be international, but also to educate others about Japanese way of relating. So Japan has to make an effort, but I don't see how it can be successful if the others also do not make an effort to understand Japanese organizations, etc. So that's what I will say about human part of network. The digital network, I think that is more of a technical problem. And here you have a question of adopting a new system or improving marginally what exists. And what is important in both cases, I think, is to make sure that the system has flexibility with respect to relating to the rest of the world. And I think the language translation facilities that are now being experimented on both in the US but also in Japan, as far as the protocols are standard, you can probably operate in many different languages without knowing all the languages. That will be one area, I think, of building networks in the future that people will have to put more emphasis on practically. Instead of having the fanciest modem and the speediest computer, I think we need these substantive features in the network. And translation features for other technical aspects, for example, financial data, that are relatively trouble-free and we can have multiple checks so that people do not act on wrong information. So we have to optimize. We cannot maximize just in one direction, namely make the shortest time network, but we also have to make it accurate. So sometimes there is a trade-off between time and accuracy. So we have to, again, define our optimization problem appropriately here. Third aspect, which is network of firms, I think is going to be important because with increasing returns to scale and non-linearities of various kinds, you can have competition, but you cannot have classical perfect competition which is many atomistic firms which don't need to be networked. The only thing that they need is price, right? This decentralized price signal motivated system. The modern, or one might say even postmodern, business systems or market systems will be networked in the sense that there will be a few firms, but these firms will compete. Technically, you can think of something like Bertrand kind of competition, but you will have basically interaction among the firms. So it is not going to be a Nash equilibrium where you take the other firm's action as given, or the other firm takes your action as given. You have to actually exchange information. The question will be, how do you prevent it from being collusive? So the antitrust problem actually is going to come back here. And this field of law and economics, is going to be very, very important.
Thank you very much.
I would like to make some question about very basic character of the concept. The first one is on the innovation, concept of innovation. According to your explanation, now advanced countries has established such kind of in a sense of institutionalization of innovation by establishing the national innovation system, as you pointed out. But I think that there is many steps of innovation, because as you know that when we think about the innovation, there's many process of the breakthrough. For example, in the case of company, there's a production technology and a product technology, product concept, or the more broader is the brand image concept. That is related to psychological manipulation.
Yes.
And so that
it's technology of manipulation.
Yeah. And but as far as I thinking about the innovation, I think that that technology is brought up, but in the form of breakthrough. As far as I know, there are some cases in the breakthrough. The driving force of some persons discover some innovative idea and innovative data is more important than the institutional aspect of in the society.
Of course, ideas are very important. I don't disagree with you. Let me go back a little and clarify one thing. My model actually applies to both incremental and breakthrough innovations, and both process and product innovations. But let's look at this breakthrough and whether it is breakthrough product or breakthrough technology. We find that ideas themselves, increasingly scientific ideas themselves, of course, need institutional housing. Modern university itself is evolutionarily has become such an institution. There may still be people, who are capable of coming up with very brilliant ideas on their own and maybe publishing. But as in economics, we don't get so many of these. But I used to talk with Carl Sagan, when I was a student at Cornell. He was a very nice person.
Yeah.
And he would tell me how many crazy kind of innovative ideas are presented, to editors of science journals. From the Walden collisions idea to, I showed you also a list of ideas that have been proven wrong in science as well. So it is of course possible. So theoretically, I admit the possibility of what you said. But practically, it seems that we have very rigorous institutionalization already of testing of ideas, at least by the peers, and probably rejection of some good ideas even. But I think on the positive side, what institutionalization has done is to have increased the pace of all kinds of ideas. So in a way, I'm not as pessimistic as Schumpeter was about routines in big organizations. Although I know that many creative people do feel in universities everywhere in the world that sometimes the processes, especially processes like peer review, tenure review, etc., might reject some good ideas initially. The requirement that institutionally you have to be innovative means that probably more innovative ideas are produced. So if you compare society A, where there is no institutionalization, at present day world situation, not going back to the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution, but today, if a country has no institutions of innovation, but another country